What is up, you guys? So I was going on Twitter this morning and I was, I was like just looking at the replies to some of my old tweets about, America, living in America versus outside of the US, and, how much easier it is to live outside of the US in terms of budget and cost of living and whatever. And people's reactions are always like, well, America is still the greatest country on earth, and why would you live in mosquito-infested other countries and whatever. So when I see people say things like that, America's still the greatest country on earth, it's so great, I would, no matter what, how much I'm struggling in the US, I would never live in another country, and if you do, you're like stupid. Like, whenever I see comments like that, it tells me two things. First of all, they haven't spent a lot of time outside of the US. Second of all, and I respect your love for America. I love America because it means a lot to me. There's so much that America means to me. Freedom and protecting my family and all these things. But the second thing that it tells me when I hear someone say, well, America's still better than anywhere else, it's still the greatest country on earth, and you can still make more money in America than you can make anywhere else. What it tells me is that you are an employee and not an entrepreneur. So it just tells me who you are. It tells me where you're at, and that's totally fine. It's fine to be an employee, and you're successful as an employee in the US, which makes me very happy for you, because the reason why I left was, and the reason why I've always had a hard time, is because I wasn't successful as an employee, and as a newbie entrepreneur, it's just very expensive to start from the bottom as an entrepreneur in the US. And I don't know how many of my viewers or followers are like freelancing or entrepreneurs or even like running rentals or whatever, and just at the start of their journey like me. But if you are, you know that it's very hard, it's very expensive, and it's also very regulated. Like, there's just a lot of hoops to jump through, just to have your T's crossed, I's dotted. Forget about the making money part, just from like the legal part of making sure that you're not going to get in trouble down the road, you're not going to get in trouble with IRS, like you're doing things right. It's just like scary and tough to be an entrepreneur in the US. And the costs are just, the barrier to entry is just very high, just like the basic costs of setting up. So maybe if you're an employee working for a big company and you have a stable job, like, I'm sure it works, and I wish I was you, is what I'll say. I wish I was you. I'm not like dunking on anyone that has that experience, because that's something that I failed at, and I was unable to keep that kind of position going. But on the other hand, it kind of forced me to explore options of living cheaply while still being in my beginning entrepreneurial phase. And what I discovered is that there are plenty of places in the world, and what I've been discovering, reading about, doing research on, and it's not always about, and especially when you're building a business or multiple businesses, it's not always going to be about like where the country's at. It's also going to be about like, not where the country is at, how strong your currency is, how strong you are right now. Unless you're an employee. If you're an employee, then it's always about how strong you are right now, because you don't even have to worry about the long-term stuff. But as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as someone who has to think long-term, the direction that a country is going in is very important, and the direction that the US and the entire West is going in is very different than the direction of like the non-Western countries. So if you look at non-Western countries, and this is one thing that I've been noticing a lot, and here in Colombia and in a lot of countries that are very poor, like post-Soviet countries, countries in Southeast Asia, countries in South America, a big, huge denominator between, like a common denominator between a lot of these very poor countries is very high regulation and lack of innovation. So whenever whenever there's something new, like for example in Colombia, Uber, they banned Uber when Uber came. They banned Bitcoin. Whenever something like a new technology or like a new like business idea or something comes along, and the government gets, because they're so old-fashioned and closed-minded, these very poor governments will ban certain things. They'll place a huge tax on the big businesses because they're scared. They're scared of innovation, they're scared of growth, and they're scared that, they're scared of what it's going to do to their country. What if like the people in my country are going to have to compete with like these huge companies? That's going to cause a lot of poverty in my country, and that's going to cause a lot of crime. So I'm not putting it all down, but this is the way that very poor countries think. They use a lot of regulation, they clamp down a lot on their and this is why a huge portion of the world is like very cheap compared to the US and compared to like countries like Singapore and the UAE and like, I don't know, all these like kind of, I don't want to use the UAE actually, but like Western countries. So that's a big, huge denominator that I realized, but things are changing at the same time. Like everybody uses Uber, including people in government here in Colombia. Everybody uses Bitcoin now, and the trajectory is different. The trajectory is Colombians and other countries realizing we have to compete with the West. We have to compete with like the, I forgot what it's called, like basically like Australia, Canada, US, whatever. So we have to compete with these countries, and we have to like bring in innovation. They're incentivizing like rich people going into their countries, businesses going to their countries, entrepreneurs, stuff like that. They're incentivizing hiring. They're saying we'll give you an extra passport if you hire people in our country. So things like that they're trying to do to try and catch up with the US. The West, on the other hand, the trajectory they're going, like they are still, they're still here, and the rest of the world is still here. But the trajectory they're going in is the opposite. It's the opposite trajectory. And that's what investors and entrepreneurs look at, because that's going to affect your bottom line long term. That's going to affect how much you're being squeezed, the direction things are going. And the direction things are going in the US and the West is the opposite direction. They're increasing regulation. They're saying, we don't want people in our country. We have too many people in our country. We don't want more innovation. We have too much going on. We don't want too many people on, this platform and that platform and that platform. We want to try and regulate more. They're basically, they have too much going on, and they want to basically weed out all the, in Singapore, for example. In Singapore, they just have too many people. There's too many people that want to live in Singapore. Everything is too expensive. So you know what the government does? They increase the barriers to entry. If you want to have a car, if you want to drive a car in Singapore, not have a car, if you want to just drive a car in Singapore, by the way, the permit that is like $100,000 just to get a permit to drive in Singapore. You know what they're trying to do? They're trying to raise the barrier to entry because they have too many people there to block other people from going out. That doesn't make Singapore a bad country. It just means that they're not open for business. They're not open for more people. The trajectory is like different than some of these like more emerging countries. So when you say America is still the greatest country on earth, it's kind of ignoring the fact that countries kind of go up and down. And if you look at history, like that's how it is. Things go up and down. They peak, investments go up and down. And if you're an employee for like a big stable company and you're gonna keep your job forever, then great. But I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of people are losing their jobs. Even the people at their comfortable, cushy Twitter jobs are losing their jobs. And it's not because the people at the top are these big evil business owners. It's because things are changing, the economy is changing. Businesses in the US are realizing that for the same amount of work, but even better and harder work, and without the possibility of getting sued like crazy and getting, all this drama, they can go cheaper to other countries. I'm talking about like, companies that you know about, Amazon, I don't know, like Facebook, like whatever, like Facebook doesn't have a customer service line, but any like big company that you have, Comcast, Infinity, the biggest monopoly in the US, they should have they should have, they should have the money to be able to afford employees in the US, right? But still they're going abroad. You know why? Because the big, huge people realized that they could cut their costs dramatically by going abroad, producing things abroad. And, of course, people are gonna say, well, let's then ban people from going abroad. Let's ban people from producing, things in Chinese factories. Let's ban people. Let's ban American companies from going abroad. Made in the USA. Keep it at home. That's just gonna cause people to just go abroad altogether. The businesses at the top, because you might be working for an American company, you might be working and comfortable where you are and not realizing what's happening at the executive level. You're just looking at things from the position of an employee. And from the position of an employee, everything's gonna stay the same because your salary is gonna stay the same. Everything stays you don't see what's happening at the decision-making level. You don't see what's happening to those, a lot of your bosses at the top are losing money rather than profiting. They're losing money every year rather than profiting. But you're never gonna see that because you're getting paid like a same salary every year. So when people say, and I don't know if you notice like the cost of everything around you going up, unless your salary is going up with the cost of everything around you, you're still gonna feel it a little bit. So that's what it tells me when people say stuff like that. It's like, I appreciate your sentiment, but at the end of the day, like, some countries are moving towards faster growth. They're kind of scrambling actually, because maybe in the past they were very different, but not everything stays the same. Not every country is going to stay the same forever. And the US and most of the West, if you notice, like the new Prime Minister of London, I remember this, like, was tweeting like, oh, this is such an abomination that Donald Trump is being allowed back on Twitter. This is like hate is being allowed to progress, and we have to increase our regulation on our media. We have to put more, restrictions. And like, I understand the sentiment. It's like, oh no, we have to prevent all these bad forces coming in from here and there and whatever. It's like an emotional thing. It's like, oh no, these evil people, these like immigrants are trying to come into our country. These, bad attitude people are adding hate and division and like all these things. But if you notice the trajectory that most American politicians, most Western politicians are going into, their attitude is not very innovation minded. They're not thinking like business-like. And their whole focus is on regulation. We have to ban, we have to regulate, we have to stop people from coming in, stop people from doing this and that, which is understandable, and that's what usually happens when an economy has peaked. But when I talk about America not being the greatest country on earth anymore, I'm just talking about in terms of the trajectory. The trajectory is a little different. And in a lot of other countries, they don't have, their politicians aren't thinking like that. Their politicians are thinking, oh shit, we've been squashing ourselves for centuries. We have to catch up to the West. We have to, they're doing, if we were talking to some of like the people, there's so much programs happening from governments, other governments across the world, programs to try and bring in Western companies, programs to try and innovate, attract people from coming in, like lower regulations. And it's just like a very different attitude that I'm seeing in other places than in the West. So I don't know if I'm making sense of that, but I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I hope you don't take this rant as like an anti-America. It's still very pro-America, pro-American values, and this is actually very much an American value: freedom, innovation, like growth, all these things, prosperity. So it's just a post-America America. So cool. See you guys in the next video.